Sir, we'll start. I think. Santosh, sir.
Okay, okay.
So we'll start now. I think Lalit sir is already.
Yeah, Lalit is here.
Okay. So, good evening to all, and hi to others who are participating from other countries. Today, we have the lecture, 56th lecture on caste and socio psychological perspective on constitutional democracy. Today, our speakers, Dr. Lalit Kadre, already last week he given a wonderful lecture, and it is also very good and the topic. I invite Professor Santosh Rawat sir to give brief introduction about Lalit sir and also moderate the today's session. So thank you, sir. Santosh sir, hand over to you.
Okay. Good evening, friends. Uh, I'm extremely happy again to introduce uh, Professor Lalit Khandariji. He's a committed and bright intellect of our community who teaches as an associate professor of social work at Pacific University. And before joining PhD program, he completed his master's from TIS, that is Master in Social Work, and also MPhil in Planning and Development in IIT Mumbai. And he served on various committees, including personal committees and faculty senate at India and in US. And Dr. Khandare has taught courses, research program evaluation, and research methods in social work, and PhD in educational leadership and graduate psychology program. With nearly 24 years of experience in social work practice and teaching, about 19 years of which were in the USA. He has extensive expertise in global social work education, trauma, mental health, and global health issues. He is a fellow of Global Young Academy Germany and has held leadership in service roles in organizations such as Council of Social Work Education, uh, which has a accreditation review and commission on global social work education and Council of Global Social Issues. Apart from this, as I was mentioning in my last coordinating talk, that Lalitji helped lot of people from marginalized communities, students rather, to study abroad. And he's one of the pioneering sort of channel for many students who are doing PhDs, masters, and various courses, not just in America but across the world, to provide them good facilities and opportunities. Friends, today we are again having a privilege of listening Professor Lalit. Uh, he has, as Ravi said, delivered a brilliant talk yesterday. In last Saturday, uh, evaluating the global structure of entire uh, sort of uh, models for emancipation of marginalized community and what we meant by social security. But mere materialistic security or economic security or even job security is not enough unless we really feel confident within us as a free human being, a human being without stigma, And as Dr. Ambedkar very rightly said in Annihilation of Caste, that caste is nothing but the notion of mind. And that's the psychological issue, which sort of carries within us or the people who come from marginalized community throughout life wherever they go. May that be in top universities or top positions in India or bureaucratic position, even political positions. Caste never sort of leaves the stigma. So this is extremely important topic that Lalit is going to explore today about caste and socio-psychological perspective on constitutional democracy, which is such a beautifully framed title which encapsulates the psychology, the notion of caste, constitution, and also the governance. And that's the great vision that Dr. Ambedkar himself had for India. So I wouldn't take much time between you and Lalit. I would invite uh, graciously to deliver a talk in this series. Yeah, Lalit.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Santosh Kumar Raut sir, for elaborate introduction and invitation. As always, we really cherish our friendship and dialogue on quite important issues, not only on this occasion but also generally. So, really grateful to have uh, a kind of Dhamma Mitra. Yeah, thank you. So I will let me share my screen.
Could you able to share? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Maybe.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay, you can see the first slide.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, caste and social psychological perspective on constitutional democracy. So, Jabim, everyone. So, thank you for inviting me to be a guest speaker on this occasion. As we all celebrate like 75th year of Indian Constitution. I really appreciate Malipalli Lakshmiya sir, chairperson of Center for Dalit Studies, Dr. Santosh Raut from Harvard University, um, the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, other collaborators, Center for Dalit Rights, National Alliance for Social Justice, Dalit Coalition, People's Campaign for Socio-Economic Equity, Dalit Bahujan Front, National Movement for Land, Labor and Justice, Dalit Human Rights Defenders Network, National Council of Women's Leaders. So really admire all these collaborative efforts. And as I spoke in the last session on the social security, this is kind of connected but a different topic, how we can look at the history of constitution and how the values that were ingrained in the constitution and that led for the future of this nation, especially looking at the national unity, since we as a nation or as a especially in Indian subcontinent, we have seen the history of various invasions, and that were primarily because of various divisions within society and also other reasons. So it is important to look at the national unity, social revolution, and democracy, building of the democracy. So some of these were the important areas and aimed of the constitution, and what are the current challenges and solutions. So as much I will try to focus on caste to a certain extent, but the topic is broad, because there are not only caste but the religion and other communities, how we understand constitution in larger socio-psychological framework. And as we are having this celebration of 75th year, we also recognize the importance of the Indian Constitution and the framers of the Constitution, especially Dr. Ambedkar, who played crucial role in drafting Indian Constitution. So on 1949, November 26, Constituent Assembly adopted Constitution of India. It came into effect on January 26, 1950. So the independence that we won was after a long fight for freedom from British colonial government. And although this November 26th was celebrated as Constitution Day or Law Day every year, on the occasion of 125th birth anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar, this renewed interest in May 2015, the Union Cabinet announced that November 26 will be observed as Constitution Day to promote constitutional values among citizens. So it is interesting to instill, see these efforts to imbibe the values of what all the rights and all the duties and means for the citizens. So unlike some of the countries like US and other European countries, where we see that although example US was founded or got independent quite long back, in but the lot of this constitutional amendment, took place over the years, and the reason for those constitutional amendment were there were cause and effects. So people fought for those rights, and some of those we see in our fundamental rights from US. So, however, in India, a lot of those best practices or best laws that Dr. Ambedkar studied from all over the world came directly in constitutions, like example, women's voting right or labor rights and other rights that we see in the Indian Constitution. So instilling those values among citizens is extremely important. Otherwise, people may not feel the relevance of those values. And Dr. Santosh Rao sir also pointed some of this in last discussion, and also briefly in today's discussion as he introduced the topic. Dr. Ambedkar, looking at the historical past with great anxiety and fear, raised some potent questions in his speech to the Constituent Assembly, and these are important questions. Will we be able to preserve our independence? So preserve within and outside. So this is important. So we are not only focusing on what is happening within India, but the unity and the strength of the nation is important. And so it is because he was looking at the historical context, what happened in the past. So we place the country above the creed, or will they place creed above the country? So this is very important. So how the caste, religion, language, and other differences, how we will address um, those uh, diversities, we sometimes call it, but how we address those diversity when they become uh, point of hate and divisions among the community, among people in India. What would happen to her democratic constitution? Will she be able to maintain it, or will she lose it again? So Dr. Ambedkar pointing out here. So although we got independence in 1949, we got this constitution in 1949, independence in 1947. So he was pointing out, like, historically we were together long back, as a, not necessarily as a nation, but there were constitutional or republican values in the nation. How people let go those bonds, bonding among people, and how those values of republic vanished, and how over the long centuries uh, India was uh, had a lot of invasion or divisions and fights among different um, kingdoms within and also outside. So we have to look at how this constitution is so important to establish uh, this nation making process. So it is, although we got independence, sometimes we talk about nationalism and nation. People are proud of their country, and there is pride and all of that. But uh, has been a lot of important theoreticians like Aloysius. He talks about um, the nation, and also Professor Vivek Kumar, and I see some professors here, Professor Ramaya here in the talk. Today's discussion, I see some of the participants who talks about the nation is not like a static word. So it is ongoing process. So it is nation building process. So it is not, we have not completed that process. It will evolve, and it has some prerequisite. So the creation of India as a sovereign independent republic was in some profound sense the commencement of bold experiment in political affair, as significant as any that had been conducted in the history, especially in the context of so much uh, differences people have in India. As historic moment of transition of power from British Raj to independent state did not automatically create nations. So in its spirit and values, it was goal, larger goal to be realized, and nation making is an ongoing process. The constitutional democracy envisioned the building of trust, of care, inclusion, bonding among its citizens, and getting rid of traditions and ill practices that has caused the divisions, hatred, and trauma. So it is important opportunity to reimagine a new India where traumatic ruptures could heal the past and make the new possibilities for future, where each citizens exercise and live their freedom irrespective of their background. India's founding fathers and mothers established in the constitution both nation's ideal and the institutions and processes for achieving them. So the ideals were national unity, integrity, democratic and equitable society. So this was indeed crucial to address the historical collective wrongs and traumas caused by caste, class, gender, religion, region, language, and other intersectional vulnerabilities. The leaders of new government and people envisioned a new society was to be achieved through social revolution pursued with democratic spirit using constitutional and democratic institutions. So that was the third one with the And then Constitution intend to realize this three larger goal of unity, social justice, revolution, and democracy. So the first one, the national unity and integrity is realized through constitutions, highly centralized federalism, revenue services, civil services, and governors. Without historically addressing the democratic ideals, the national unity may become threat to democratic ideals. Like example, if we see it during during the emergency time or sometime some type of authoritarian regime evolve. So it has been always contested. Should we prioritize the national unity or realize equity, justice, and liberty? So these are different goals, but what should we prioritize? With troubled past, we know that these principles and values will take decades and centuries to realize through constitutional institutions. Um, Scholars like John Rawls talks about setting up just institutions based on justice as a fairness to yield principles of justice. It requires people's behavior to comply entirely with demands of this proper functioning of these institutions. So, however, the quality of lives that people are able to live should be the assessment benchmark in realizing the fair justice. Sometimes Dr. Ambedkar talks about people's um, uh, development in terms of women's development, or how much we have progressed in terms of annihilating caste or other benchmark that are important. National unity and progress lies upon the justice and dignity of most downtrodden people. So the institution plays a role in bringing equity and justice for all. If the institution plays important um, role we have to look at if these institutions are playing important role for in the interest of the ruler or the government, or it is uh, working in the interest of the people, and if it is working in the interest of the ruler as opposed to the needs of people, the justice will be destined to fail. So it is important to understand the different components uh, in the democratic in the making of the democracy. Granville Austin, one of the most renowned constitutional expert in the world, mentioned that Indian Constitution, by its very existence, was a social revolutionary statement. It was to be a modernizing force. The social revolution and democracy were to be strands of seamless web, mostly closely related. It was indeed revolutionary for society, and he was looking at how in depth the Indian Constitution highlight like important areas that were not only focusing on just functioning of the government, but also how the importance and rights for the most vulnerable are enshrined. Not only those rights are enshrined, but also how they can utilize or these institutions, government institutions, to realize those rights. So it was really revolutionary for society to have democratic government, representative democracy, personal liberty, and equality before law. Similar to the US, other countries, Dr. Ambedkar proposed extensive social security measures to be added to the constitution. However, they were not adopted in the constitution, but rather we see those reflected in directive principles of state policy, not necessarily in the fundamental rights. The social economic equitableness, as expressed in the directive principles of state policy, was um, equally revolutionary fundamental rights are crucial that enlist rights to equality, freedom, rights against exploitation, and provision of constitutional remedy. It can be seen as equalizing the past inequities and violence. Some of the provisions may also look just system for communities who were mostly impacted by hierarchical caste societies. For example, abolishing zamandari or alternating property relations and equal provisions to address discrimination in education, employment for disadvantaged communities. So the second principle was like public interest versus personal interest. So Edmund Burke, in his famous speech to the electors of Bristol, the Parliament, he said that Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which um, interest are each must maintain as an agent and advocate against other agent and advocate. So there are people from different interest group who forms part of the government, maybe bureaucrats or the political representative. But the parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local purposes, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good resulting from the general reason of the whole. So you choose a member indeed, but when you have chosen them, uh, they are not member of the Bristol, but uh, they are member of the parliament. So the argument for policy justifies political decisions by showing that the decisions advance or protect some collective goal of the community as a whole. Arguments of the principle justifies as political decisions by showing that the decision respects or secures some individual or group rights. So that is from Dorkin. All over the world today, every ruler, emperor, king, president, minister, parliament holds power not for his own, but for his subjects' advantage. So this is important distinction. So people may fight for um, elections to gain power through their political parties, but once they assume the role in the government, as a prime minister or different ministers, they are not part of their party, but their interest lies in the governance and interest of all the countrymen and women. The public service principle. So this is another important segment in the Constitution. So public officials holding constitutional offices should act in the interest of public, not in the interest of their kin, family, friends, and others with whom they have connections. So every member of the Indian civil services, so these are important principles that are there. They should maintain high ethical standards, integrity, honesty, political neutrality, promoting principles of merit, fairness, and impartiality in discharge of their duties. They should have accountability and transparency, responsiveness to the public, particularly to the weaker section, courtesy and good behavior with public. They shall commit themselves to and uphold the supremacy of the Constitution and democratic values, defend and uphold sovereignty and integrity of India, and security of state, public order, decency, and morality. Maintain integrity in public services, take decisions solely in public interest, and use or cause to use public services resources efficiently, effectively, and economically. Declare any private interest related to his public duties and take steps to resolve any conflict in the way that protects the public interest. So you can see it is beautiful, like all different areas are listed here, how one should be objectively deliver their services in the interest of the people and the nation. And it is important to see reflect if people are able to the people who are in bureaucracy and also public offices, are they implementing those principles? So as we look at some of the challenges and solutions, so human nature is neither good or not bad. So although there are laws written based of the laws, Dr. Ambedkar said that it will be the responsibility of the people who are in the power to um, to make sense of the constitution, even if it is they feel it is extremely bad. Uh, it and even if it is extremely good, people who are in power may take uh, it to the extreme uh, problematic way in terms of implementing it, not necessarily in people's interest, but deviating from the basic principles of the Constitution. So it is important that all these challenges that we may see here in implementing the Constitution for realizing democracy, democratic values and nation building. So it is the role of the people who are in the power. And here we'll focus on 4 areas: cultural trauma, groupism, altruism, moral concept of justice and caring. James Baldwin, famous African scholar, he said that we have got to be as clear-headed about human beings as possible because we are still each other's only hope. Constitutional morality is not natural sentiment. It has to be cultivated. We must realize that our people have yet to learn it. Democracy in India, only a top dancing on the Indian soil, which is essentially undemocratic. So it is an ongoing process to cultivate those democratic values and constitutional ethos. Looking at cultural trauma, it occurs when members of collective feel that they have been subject to horrendous events that leaves indelible mark on the group consciousness, marking their memories forever and changing their identity in fundamental and irrevocable ways. This trauma affect not only the survivor but also perpetrators of violence. Sometimes we just focus on the survivor, and it is important. Dr. Ambedkar also highlighted, like, people always focus on people who are suffering from untouchability, something need to be done with them. But rather it is people who are perpetuating those iniquities need to be addressed. So the trauma affect both. On unconscious mind, Carl Jung, famous psychologist, said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So this is very important to understand how people may make sense of their surrounding, their life scenarios, and call it their destiny. And unless that unconscious become conscious awareness, one may not act to address that fate. The raise consciousness to raise the consciousness about unconscious influence of trauma at the societal level and draw connections between it. It can be a roadmap to lead effective resistance for anti-caste or anti-intersectional inequities. So be it gender, sexual or sexual identity or other communal differences. It is crucial for civil society to be aware of past and ongoing trauma against most of-risk communities. They have to work with individuals and communities consciously to make aware about their past, work with them to address ongoing traumas and resolve stop further collective trauma through establishing the ideal based on equal relationship and sameness. So this is very important. Um, there are other ways to understand collective trauma or collective memory, which is not neutral. So we have to understand that something might have happened in the past, maybe the caste-based atrocities or violence over the centuries. There has been maybe other forms of trauma, collective trauma, that can be a weapon of division. So it can be a tool for reconciliation if it is holistic. Sometimes the people in the to come in power, they may use it as a weapon for divisions. The key is whether society choose to confront painful truth or manipulate history for the power. Sometimes there is polarization that occurs when societies divide people in opposing groups with sharply contrasting views, often leading to conflict, distrust, and political gridlock. That is through undermining democracy and increasing violence and hindering the crisis response. And we also see in last few decades there is huge emergence of misinformation, not only in India but also globally. There is distrust in the institutions, and identity politics fuels the divisions. Famous scholar Olkan elaborates that there is shared memory of catastrophic events. So, example, in the past there may be some invasion or defeat or massacre or humiliation. That knowledge or memory is passed down throughout the generations, shaping a group's identity. So the group unconsciously chooses to keep the trauma alive to maintain cohesion. A leader often manipulate these traumas to mobilize followers. So this can be seen in the example of Mughal invasion in India, and then how the hatred uh, against the Muslims, or um, there may be hatred against specific other communities that has some historical past, and that may um, help some communities to maintain cohesion and keep other communities uh, away, and that leaders may use that to manipulate these traumas to mobilize their follower. And it is also seen in the countries like Serbs, the fight between Serbs and the Battle of Kosovo. So that justifies the emergence of nationalism in 1990s in that country. And there was Armenian genocide central to the Armenian identity and diaspora politics. So in these scenarios, external enemies are demonized to preserve the internal unity. So there is another important uh, political theoretician, Jeffrey Alexander, who talks about cultural trauma, wrote extensively about India-Pakistan division and the trauma of that uh, partition on people in the continent. He talks about cultural trauma, where he states that the trauma is not just about event itself, but how societies interpret it. So the event may occur. So example, over the period of time, like there might have been uh, violence against and segregations against African Americans in the US, or specific event might have happened. And then how people from African American or civil society, how they narrate that atrocities or violence, and how that they create the meaning around that, and that shapes some policies or civil rights act through institutionalizing some protective mechanisms. So the civil rights movement reframed the slavery and segregation as a moral injury to American democracy, and that led to some of the important rights for uh, racial equity in the US. This is another concept of groupism that is one of the important challenge to the constitution and democracy. So self-centered perspective to the group-centered. So groupism is kind of extension of egoism. So the ego groupism is the individual centric people have, that I think all of you understand, and how that translates into the group, that become groupism. The person in the group transfer their own self-centered perspective to the group-centered frame of reference. That individual interprets event in terms of groups, interest, and beliefs. So anything happens, small thing happens to them individually, they will interpret that as their group interest and beliefs. The holders of the institutional post may act differently to protest or demand led by different identities. So we have seen some the principles of governance that the holders of institutions should comply, but that individual egoism or groupism um, uh, delineate those principles, and they may not act in those larger interest of the government and society, but the interest of their groups. The negative messaging about other groups' action generally triggers the stereotypes that helps to mold biased interpretation of other groups' behavior. So we may see misinformations or in through social media in current times, but it has been there for centuries, where there has been some messages about certain communities that may create stereotypes or stigma around those communities. Then it puts them into quite vulnerable scenarios from the perspective of the larger group. The complex nexus of support of constitution, complex nexus or support of constitutional institution, office bearer, and community groups from caste or gender-based supremacist background may result in denial of justice, justice for the marginalized communities. So we have seen that in thousands of cases each year. Example, Khairlanji case, where the local communities of dominant caste and local laws and order system could not provide justice to the victim. And sometimes the constitutional office bearer, even if they are from scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, those groups or those individuals may not act in the interest of their own community, uh, or rather they want to be on the side of like justice, but that larger nexus plays important role in determining the fate of those victims. The ideology of extreme right-wing groups in US or other countries, essentially they are reactionary and directed towards returning the government to the principles espoused by the constitutional framers of liberty, freedom, and patriotism. So this we have seen in the beginning. Are we aspiring towards unity or nationalism, or are we aspiring towards the aim of equity, justice, and liberty for the most downtrodden? So sometimes they may feel that they are infused by the American revolutionaries who fought for their freedom and civil liberties. Robin and Post argues that for many of these groups, the mandate of racial purity of white supremacy that mandates the cleaning out the alien elements in population like Black, Jews, Hispanic, Native Americans, and in more recent times, we can see emergence of anti-Asian hatred. There were instances of hatred against Sikhs and other South Asian religious groups. So, we see this emerge in even in country like India, and other countries, and that is a result of groupism, and that perpetuates the hatred and trauma. So this is another uh, aspect of the challenge, that is altruism. So there is narcissistic expansive view versus altruistic humanistic view. So our group is superior, the chosen and the elite, versus all people are equal and worthwhile. Outsiders are potential enemy, outsiders are potential friends. Our rights and claims supersede other rights. No groups has a prior claim. Their lives are expandable. All lives are sacred. If I help in groupers, it makes me better person. If I help out groupers, it makes me better person. So this is, we have to choose between these two. Are we narcissistic, expansive as a, and these are not individual concept, but as a group concept, how we are addressing this as a nation, um, or ad- we are moving towards altruistic, humanistic perspective. The moral concept of justice and caring. So here, as we see that independent India promised trust towards all, especially most downtrodden, but institutional, which were instilled with the trust uh, and hope and promise of, and the speech that you remember that Dr. Ambedkar gave at the Constituent Assembly. So there was a sense of hope and trust instilled by the representative, but of the people. But that trust and hope, if it is betrayed, that trust result in the institutional betrayal. So there are some theoretical understanding of how this trust that we uh, give on the institutions or the government, those are betrayed if not implemented in true spirit. The humanistic code, the notion of universality of humankind, is an antidote to the rigid perspective, characteristics of primitive culture, nationalism, and self-serving morality. The moral justice focused on like protecting separateness of people. Individualistic orientation emphasizes the rights and entitlement around life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, equal opportunity, fair treatment, and justice. The caring orientation, in contrast, assume the connectedness perspective. And Dr. Ambedkar also highlighted this in as he was visualizing how the fraternity, because justice, equality, liberty, and the fraternity, or the Maitri that he used the term, how that is so important in building the bridges across the community, not necessarily merely on the paper in constitutional papers and words, but in reality. So this moral precept emanating from this orientation of connectedness, and uh, that emancipate from this orientation evolve around sensitivity towards others' needs, responsibility for their welfare, sacrifices of one's own needs for the needs of the others. And we have seen these examples and practice in countries like Japan and Europe and many countries where there were crises, economic crisis, where people did not have enough to eat. So people from elite and well-off communities let go their wealth to be distributed and shared for all. So similarly, in Europe and also US, we have seen people across the background, across their skin color, fought for eradicating the segregation and slavery. So it is that caring orientation of connectedness and Maitri is extremely important. So when confronted with this complex situation, they need to decide whether to assert their rights to express caring or simply pursue their self-interest. So we have to choose between this individualistic orientation versus caring orientation. So what is our moral compass as a society? And as we look at some of the collective memory that creates that can create inclusive narratives that includes multiple perspective, not necessarily one perspective. And those perspectives are not only like shared in the news media, but also in the educational system. So each member of the community and communities feel part of this nation, and that trust that people have given or to the institutions and the leaders, how that trust is kept and promises are kept by the people who are governing this country. It is also important to look at memorials and museums. So in Europe, example, Second World War, we see that there were a lot of violence against, example, Jews. So they instituted some memorials and museums. Similarly, in the US and a lot of other countries, wherever there has been historic wrong against certain communities. So it is important to honor the victims through those, keeping those memorials and museum. And we have to be very mindful that we don't weaponize the memory in perpetuating violence and divisions. So people can remember the historic wrongs, but how one can create a holistic community that is founded on the concept of Maitri and connectedness, and how we can foster, like tangibly construct these dialogues. Like example, we can people who have not been able to share their trauma and did not get justice in a lot of atrocity or lot of cases that we see. There have been truth and reconciliation commissions in different parts of the world. There has been various other public apology by the state against certain communities. So the state and the actors need to create some spaces for constructive dialogue, intergroup storytelling, encourage shared personal narratives. And the role of civil society and the media is extremely important, that they need to be focused on facts-based news and peace-oriented discourse rather than divisions and hatred, promoting divisions and hatred. There is also a not tangible need to address structural pathways for healing through justice reform, implement restorative justice and legal accountability, prevent future conflict. Because we sometimes we feel that the constitution, what is there, I think it is perfect, but I think as we review and critically look at some of the aspects of constitution that Dr. Ambedkar and many others thought may be more progressive. So we have to look at that critically in looking at contemporary scenarios and adapt more progressive laws and policies to have equitable educational, healthcare, and livelihood resources for all. And we also not only address past conflict or present conflict, but how we can be preventative, because that will prevent a lot of cost for the nation. And it is also important to focus on mourning and not necessarily on revenge. And there should be communal commemoration and psychological healing. So we have to think about cross-cutting principles around spaces for interactions, creating safe forum for dialogue, economic equity, reduce resentment through fair resource distribution, and most foremost important is the leadership accountability. And we have to counteract the leaders who exploit trauma for power. I'll conclude my presentation with this quote by Dr. Ambedkar. In each country, the intellectual class is most influential class. This is class which can foresee, advise, and lead. In no country does the mass of people live the life for intelligent thought and action. It is largely imitative and follow the intellectual class. So there is no exaggeration in saying that the entire destiny of the nation depends upon its intellectual class. If the intellectual class is honest and independent, it can be trusted to take initiative and give proper lead when crises arise. It is true that the intellect by itself is not virtue. It is only means and use of means depends upon the ends which an intellectual person pursues. The intellectual man or woman can be a good a person, but they may easily be a rogue. Similarly, an intellectual class may be a band of high-souled persons ready to help, ready to emancipate erring, erring humanity, or it may easily be gang of crooks or body of advocates of narrow clique from which it draws its support. So here I conclude this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lalit, for wonderful presentation. Yeah, there are a lot of details and references, including Carl Jung, Rawls, and justice theories. And importantly, the second part of your talk was so fascinating, how group can sort of, as Dr. Ambedkar argues, arrange itself for having the majoritarian opinion over the minorities or over the people who are underprivileged. That is so fascinating, and that how leads to the manipulation, as you said, and the groupism and narcissist versus altruistic, especially in Indian context, how a privileged group can uh, establish a divine authority over the underprivileged groups, to sort of not just manipulate facts but also their psychological manipulation, their mental manipulation, that they believe that's how the problem will be solved. So that comparison between, uh, as you put it, narcissist and altruistic, probably I would say the privilege and underprivilege on the basis of caste in India, that's so pertinent. Common people or the priestly class, and we lose the trust. And Dr. Ambedkar used rightly the notion of Maitri, or the Buddhist principles. So thank you very much for this talk. I wouldn't comment much on what Lalit has says brilliantly. If there are questions, I would really invite those who are still in the meeting and participants to interact with Lalit. Are there questions? Prem, do you have any question?
I see some.
Yeah.
I don't. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk.
So please introduce yourself and then ask briefly your question.
Uh, I am Group Captain Dinesh Chandra from Lucknow. The lecture was I was listening, so it gave a deep insight of the Constitution of India, and compared with the others, uh, I am from Uttar Pradesh, so there are so many incidents and atrocities which are being done on scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. For a little bit time, I was missing from the lecture because there had been 2 incidents in Fatehpur district. I think that is 100 kilometers from Lucknow. Gang rape of a scheduled caste woman and killing of one Muslim youth. This has become a new normal of our society, especially in North India. Though constitutional remedies are available, but it seems only in the books. And it seems only, it is existing only in lectures. But I don't find any effective mechanism which could help these poor people or on which the atrocities are perpetrated. I have been trying since last 3-4 years to do some coordination between various groups, social groups, so that they could be provided some instantaneous help and legal help later on. So there are groups which go to the spot and do a little bit halla gulla and ensure that FIR is lodged. But that is the end of it. After this, there is no mechanism exist where a concerted effort can be put to ensure that the justice is given to these people. And somehow, as a society, we have failed in this because the incidents are continuing and rather these are increasing. So what can be done about to create a structure which can actually implement the remedies given in the society, given in the constitution? It is not a question, but question on this topic, but it is a question at large to a society. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the question that you asked is, I think, close.
I'm Group Captain Chandra.
Yes, Captain Chandraji. It was very important. The question that you asked is, I think, close to everyone's heart. And as we look at some of the studies on how the trauma impact not only the victims but the community at large. So we see those news, people who are engaged there, how they are able to address or not able to address. So we have to look at how things are playing out psychologically, and also not only that the victims one generation but also over the generations. Second is how we can take how we understand that scenario. What is the role of police or the public, the office bearers in that region? How that nexus that we talked about of the larger group consciousness is interfering with the idea of the state, like the bureaucratic state, because Weber and a lot of the scholars talked about that there will be objective institution, they will not be biased and all of that. But as you mentioned, there is only FIR, nothing moves forward. And that is the scenario with almost like 45,000 cases, extremely all over India every year, and those numbers keeps growing. And I think it is important how we can learn from Dr. Ambedkar and people maybe in different times in other parts of India, what they have done, and also what people have done in other countries when there were similar challenges. So example, and it is interesting, like when uh, uh, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was in South Africa, and he was part of uh, this movement for inclusion or equity for Indians in South Africa. And when he was trying to appeal the people, the conscious civil society consciousness there, um, he was appealing not the Indians will were already convinced like they're supporting the writing in the news what was happening, but he was trying to get support of whites and others as well. So and it is interesting, he was appealing to the consciousness of the dominant there, and he got support of them. Similarly, in the US, we see that the African American movement got support. So why in India, I think we are not able to make any progress in terms of change, because we always think that as a Indians, I'm not talking about scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, but as a Indians, the responsibility of that of treating other person as equal human is on that individual human or their caste communities. It is not the consciousness or civil society's consciousness. So what we have seen in South Africa, in a lot of countries in Europe, wherever there were, or in US, people across the race were engaged in addressing their issues. So it has not, like the slavery or apartheid did not go away just merely. There was certainly, we cannot deny the leadership of African Americans, but there were instrumental role of whites and other groups in the US. So I think that is historically one of the biggest challenge that Dr. Ambedkar has founded. I think the burden of addressing caste is solely on people who are victim of untouchability, and there is this caste, how it operates. All of us know there is always, even if there are OBC people, we try to think about like Bahujan as quite amazing word, but I think this OBC, many a times they are the perpetrator of violence against scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. However, but they may also face discrimination by dominant caste. But I think the solution, I think there is legal intervention. There should be strong, as you said, support mechanism by the community. But it is responsibility of larger state, functioning of the state. It is also responsibility of, and Dr. Ambedkar has pointed out, the issue is around, I think, how we have been treated as untouchables. It is rooted in the caste oppressed mindset, in the religion. So he looked at various other mechanisms, but I don't have like exact solution, but I think this will be a question for even after 1,000 years. Someone else will be asking same
And
question.
the question was not to you. The
Yeah,
question
yeah,
was to all of us as a
yeah.
society,
Yes.
because the government
And there
government
are
machinery has
also
failed us.
questions in the chat box. Sir, thank you very much. I feel deeply saddened by what you have reported, Chandra sir. And as Lalit said, this is not one man's job, sir. We all have to raise the communal or the community strength as much as possible. And divide is a great curse that we are suffering from. So, and that is also a gift of caste system to Indian society. That's the problem. But deeply saddened by what you have reported. There is one more question, a couple of comments in the chat box I would like to read. Uh, this is a question from Jai Surya. He is a PhD scholar. Asking how would you compare the struggle faced by Black people, USA, with those faced by Dalits in India? In today's context, among them, who do you think is facing greater challenges? How can both communities cope with these issues, and what changes do you think are needed in the public mindset to bring about meaningful and lasting progress?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a very important question because I see this question is not only about, I think, about the past and present, but about, I think it is about future. Um, so I think one of the things that we can learn from Dr. Ambedkar is he was looking at uh, the problems, diagnosing Indian problems, looking at what has happened in the past in other countries, uh, what were the best practices, things like that. I think what you asked about comparing, and this is one of the also problem, we should not compare who is having more problem. And I can, because I teach this social policy in the US. So we and the answer to that is also futuristic. That may come in India also. Okay, the severity of problem may increase. So what has happened in the US? As we see, as I was explaining, there was efforts to address uh, racial segregation, apartheid, and slavery, and all of that. There were quite strong laws instituted, as Jeffrey Alexander talks about. There is some incident. Uh, uh, if some incident happened, example. Uh, in Indian context, like Bemula, like somebody committed suicide. There was narration all over India. The issue about students' rights and equity and all of that. And then there was Rohit Vemula Act. So, or similar to Khairlanji or some other violence, and that results into some laws or so similarly in US we see like laws in various spheres. But however, what happened, and I would encourage all of you to see a documentary called 13th. Uh, it is about 13th Amendment, and it is also by Eva Duvernay, who made a movie Origin uh, uh, around caste all over the world. So what has happened over the years in the US. So the physical slavery has gone away, but they say there has been a lot of research around how it has been institutionalized through the school to prison pipeline. Example, in the schools that are there in the US, many a times they are based on where you live. So many a times it is, if there are African American community predominantly dominated, there are students from those communities in those schools. Sometimes there has been cases of drugs uh, and also gun violence. That is another issue in the US. Uh, and then when we use this word school to prison pipeline, so from the school, so the institutionalized way of creating laws in a way that those students do not go to the higher education, but they go to the prison system. So if you see the statistics in the prison system, so predominantly it is based on the population proportion, it is huge. So we see that these drugs and violence and other crimes, which is not necessarily sometime we talk about, Dr. Ambedkar talked about converting to Buddhism, following Panchashil, and addressing substance use. So one of the thing that we see as alcohol, see it is predominant. But nowadays you see that quite huge prevalence of different forms of drugs in Indian society. So that's what I'm saying, like how that may be the future severity of the community. when people or youngster may be unemployed, may not get jobs. So it will be not only the problem of uh, people from untouchable caste, but also people across who are downtrodden, who may not get good education, who will not get access to good health care. So where their energy will be driven. So that I think that documentary is very important. So I don't know if the current issue of African Americans or race is more challenging than Dalits. I think it is contextual. And we should stay away from comparing those issues. I think how.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lavi. That's very thoughtful response. Slavery is slavery everywhere, and we have to fight against it. That's the slogan. And it, as you rightly said, contextualize culture to culture and societies to societies, and every community has to really come forward for that eradication. Maybe it's a last comment because we are running out of time. We already crossed. It's a session for 1 hour, can be extended for 15 minutes. But very briefly, Lalit, this is another PhD scholar, Jnanesh from TIS Mumbai, asking, it feels very hopeful to see how caste has now started to be recognized, and even though rare, but has become the subject of study in the disciplinary domain of psychology. Would you please engage with this idea of group and its distinct cultural and historical evolution across context, especially like in USA and India? And when attempting to compare these groups based traumas, what kind of sociological and theoretical loss we see?
Yeah, this is very interesting question, but yeah, maybe yeah, I think it is important how we can uh, uh, take this knowledge forward. I think, as you highlighted, and that this issue about caste is known, that there is something out there in India. Um, but how we look at it more holistically in the nation, we have to, I think, our uh, true north, or how we frame all of this is like how we build a nation in holistic interest of all the communities. So, and how we can um, there has been not lot of development in terms of caste and psychology, in terms of literature, I would say. But I teach a course on and also engaged in the work of trauma therapy with American population. So there is, uh, I think, last 2 to 3 decades, we see tremendous development in terms of how the brain uh, physically, biologically get impacted by what is happening. Example around domestic violence, or around race-based trauma, or some physical accident. So there is a lot of literature around that, and that I think there is need of understanding how that can be, and not necessarily, because sometimes these words become, I see that, and terms become quite fascinating. So we should not get behind, again, creating some glamour around some theories. But how we, and similarly, sociological and other theories, uh, how we contextualize within India, not necessarily replicating what is out there as it is, and see what is, and in all the theories and knowledge, we should not, I think, consume it for just the sake of academic interest. I think we can learn from Dr. Ambedkar how that can be taken to the ground, how it can be uh, tested at action level. So there is a lot of work, but I think and there is a lot of development. I think a lot of research and best practices that are there all over the world. I think that can be documented, and not only theories but also research tools, which are quite amazing. And yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for that wonderful response and question. As Dr. Ambedkar really said, caste discrimination is a discrimination within the race. We do not know caste by their color or by their race. All Indians are racially probably they look similar. I wouldn't say this is one race, but there are no color distinction. Brahmin can be a dark skin and fair skin, so the other sort
Yeah.
of parts of the caste groups. You are very right. We have to sort of discriminate that between the within context, and racial discrimination in America does not have a divine scientific sanctity or justification. Of course, it's cruel everywhere, but caste has a divine sanctity. Like if you go to church, they would say we are the part of the fractured body of the Jesus. May they be white, black, or whatever gender they belong to. They all are uh, part and parcel of body of one God. But in caste system, God itself is divided into four immobilized, eternal, permanent system, which you can't change. So that's the not just metaphysical, is a religious, divine, complicated problem which justifies slavery, which remains eternally alive. And I think Dr. Ambedkar very rightly address this through various means, as Lalit sir very pertinently sort of evolve the models how Dr. Ambedkar's efforts were approaching to eradicate those slaveries. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk, Lalit. I thank you on behalf of all the organizations that have organized this lecture series. You are so generous to give time for two lectures. I hope I did not put you into a demand, but you are generous and kind to get up so early and sparing your time. But behalf of Mallipalli Lakshmiya sir, team of CDS, Ravi, Center for Dalit Studies, Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, Center for Dalit Rights, National Alliances of Social Justice and Dalit Coalitions, and DBF, NMLL, DHRDN, and DCWL, all these organizations, Council of Women Leaders and all. I'm very thankful for your series of two talks on the celebrating of Diamond Jubilee or 75th anniversary of Indian Constitution. Looking forward to seeing all of you next Saturday, friends. Wish you a very good night. And thank you very much, Lalit, once again.
Thank
Ravi,
you, sir.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ananda. So maybe next Saturday, same time, we'll meet 7 o'clock. Thank you, Led sir, once again, on behalf of CDS and all our
Yes. Hi, sir.
participants. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you.